As Imperceptibly as Grief is a poem written by the American poet Emily Dickinson. In it, she compares the passing of grief to that of the passing of summer. But of course, you'd know all of that if you watched part 1 of my analysis of this poem. There we have part 1 of my analysis for As Imperceptibly as Grief, and this is part 2. So make sure you've watched that bit first before resuming this video. Anyway, with that out of the way, here is part 2. On screen now are the 4 questions that I left you with at the end of part 1 of my analysis of As Imperceptibly as Grief. I hope you've had time to have a think about them and to maybe make your own notes or annotations, but in just a moment my ideas will be appearing on screen. The image dusk drew earlier in suggests that the passing of time is uncontrollable and can act in confusing ways, whilst again highlighting the inevitability of time passing, and therefore by extension death and grief. Foreign, in This Morning Foreign Shone, suggests that mornings and their associations of happiness and opportunity and life feels very unfamiliar to the speaker of this poem as their grief begins to fade. This is further emphasised by harrowing grace, which suggests that something that is usually positive, grace, has become unsettling or distressing, harrowing. This reinforces the idea that the speaker has been grieving for some time, and any change to this comes as a bit of a shock to them. On the bottom line here, mourning has been personified as a guest who wants to leave, reiterating the idea that time must pass, no matter how much we might want to dwell. Time is ultimately more powerful than man. This section contains the most dashes in the poem, which suggests that the speaker's thoughts are becoming increasingly fragmented, perhaps as they panic as they realise that time is moving on, seemingly without them. This also makes the poem's timeline more ambiguous. Just how much time is passing and how quickly is it passing? Perhaps in their grief and obsession with their grief, the speaker has lost track of time. And there we go, there we have the poem's final 4 lines. These are linguistically very, very rich, so there's plenty to say. I do apologise now, but there's quite a few questions. In fact, there is a mighty whopping 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 questions for just these 4 lines, most of which are focused on language. If you would like to have a go at thinking about the effect of various pieces of language, then now's your chance to do so. And thus indicates a shift in mood for this poem. It has been very metaphorical and contemplative beforehand, but this now makes the rest of the poem feel logical and almost like a conclusion. The speaker has rationalised their grief and is ready to move on. Keel and wing are things that facilitate movement, either through water or through air. This suggests that escape requires tools in order to be facilitated. However, the summer, and therefore also the grief, does so without these things, making its escape seem natural. The plural pronoun our turns the grief from something personal and singular into something shared and universal. Perhaps Dickinson is now commenting on all grief and all summers. The adjective light suggests that the escape is something that is both natural and easy, reinforcing the idea of summer and grief needing no assistance to pass. The poem's final line contains a positive tone due to the word beautiful. It might suggest that the passing of grief is something worth celebrating. There's a full stop at the end of this stanza and therefore the whole poem. That creates a sense of finality. It suggests that the grief is over. Perhaps the persona of the poem has accepted their loss and have moved on. In these final 4 lines, there are no dashes, which is quite noticeable given how frequent they have been used throughout the rest of the poem. This lack of dashes could suggest that the speaker's mind is now clear, focused, and that they have accepted what has happened. And that is the whole poem analysed in depth. Now we're going to consider the 3 M's of the poem, and if that means nothing to you, I recommend that you have a quick look at the second video in this series, which is the second part of my analysis for Simon Armitage's The Manhunt, a link for which is appearing on screen about now. So there's my summary of the poem's meaning. Throughout, I have weaved in loads of short quotations, which is a useful skill for you to use in your written analysis. There's my summary of the poem's mood. I've said that to start with it is reflective and mournful, but as it ends it shifts towards something slightly more positive. What do you think? Is my summary of the poem's mood adequate, or have I maybe oversimplified it? And there we have my idea about Dickinson's motivation for writing the poem. I've used a bit of context as well as a few different evaluative verbs, the ones that are really bold. What do you think? Do my ideas about Dickinson's motivation sound plausible? Here we've got a theme table again. Now I have explained this in my second video of the series. Again, that's the second part of my analysis of The Manhunt. But in short, I think you might find it really useful to produce a large table that contains these themes and all 18 of the anthology poems. If you've been following this series from the beginning, you should already have a pretty substantial table by now. If I was filling out the grid for this poem, this is what I might have done. So for this poem I've ticked the power box, as I believe that this poem could be said to be about the power of grief. I don't really see this poem as being about nature, nor love, nor war, but definitely about time. This poem seems to strongly consider how grief passes, slowly, with time. The extended metaphor for the passing of summer only adds to this. I wouldn't say that this poem is to do with place, but I would say that this poem is about man, or perhaps more appropriately here, woman. This poem is strongly concerned with human emotion and how we process loss. Although nobody explicitly dies in the poem, I think it would be foolish to say it's not about death, or more generally, loss. The feelings in this poem are feelings that I think can only be gained through losing someone, either by them dying or perhaps by them leaving your life in a different way. Religion doesn't seem to appear too strongly in this poem. Yes, the capitalisation of the nouns gives it a slightly religious edge, but again, I don't think there's enough in the poem for you to be able to write a full essay about religion in it. Anyway, those are my thoughts about the themes that could apply to this poem. But what do you think? Let me know how you would fill out this grid in the comments section down below. For this task, you're going to analyse a single line of the poem in depth, but cruelly, perhaps, I want you to do that with your anthology and notes away. It would be useful for you to see what you can remember about the poem without having your notes in front of you. Find a blank copy of the poem. You could skip back to my blank copy from the start of the video, for instance. Once you've got that, use a random number generator, plenty of those online, to pick a number between 1 and 16. Work that random number generator, get your number between 1 and 16, and whichever number you are given is the line number that you are going to be working on. Copy the line down, either on a piece of paper or even on a Word doc or something similar. Then annotate it with as many different ideas, either mine, from your class, or your own, as you can. But remember, you can't use your notes. You are using your brain right now. How many different ideas can you remember or think of? Give yourself 5 minutes, then stop and compare with your anthology notes. No cheating, it's only your revision that will suffer. And there we go. That is As Imperceptibly as a Grief done. Well done for making it this far through. I know how tricky this poem can be, and I'll be honest with you, it's probably my least favourite poem in the anthology. Now, I would really appreciate it if you could drop a like on this video, especially if it's helped you out. Don't forget that I'm in the process of making videos for all of the anthology poems, so subscribe to my channel and turn on that notification bell and you won't miss a single thing. Please do also use the comments section. Feel free to ask me questions about the poem, add your own bits of analysis, or just tell me how amazing I am. Liking, commenting and subscribing also helps me with the YouTube algorithms, and the more engagement I get, the more people will see my videos. So if it's helped you, help me to help even more people. Anyway, have an awesome day, and remember to take frequent breaks from revision, as a burned out student is not a happy or successful student. So how are summer and sadness alike? Well, firstly, everybody experiences them. Secondly, they're a normal and almost inevitable part of life. And finally, when you're in the middle of them and they seem like they're never going to go away, know that they will eventually, subtly, imperceptibly fade.